The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and welcome to the HDSA Lunch and Learn webinar series. Today, we're going to hear from Dr. Cheryl Irwin, who will discuss preparing for the untitled. Dr. Irwin will talk about advance directives in order to make sure that your values and wishes are respected in all of your healthcare decisions. Dr. Irwin has a doctorate in medical humanities from UTMB and a law degree from the University of Houston Law Center. She completed a degree in biology at the University of Houston and completed a thesis in molecular genetics at MD Anderson Cancer Center. Dr. Irwin has taught and supervised the research of students in law, medicine, and public health. She speaks and publishes frequently on the topics of Huntington's disease neuroscience, medical humanities, research, law and ethics, bioethics, and law and science. Before I invite Dr. Irwin to begin, I'll go over how to ask a question and how to access this webinar after broadcast. We will answer questions after the formal presentation is over. However, you can send your questions at any time. To send a question, just go to the control panel that you see on the right-hand side of your screen, and you'll see a panel for typing in a question. Type in your question and hit the send button. This webinar will also be available for viewing after broadcast, and we will also make Dr. Irwin's slides available. To access this presentation, go to the HDSA website, www.hdsa.org, and look for the frequently used shortcuts box on the right-hand side of the homepage, and click on the link to the webinar link. You'll be able to watch the presentation, download the slides, and you'll also be able to access older Lunch and Learns as well as older Caregivers Corner webinars. Finally, I want to ask everyone listening to this webinar to evaluate this webinar after broadcast by completing the brief evaluation survey that you will receive via email. Your feedback helps us to continuously improve our webinar offerings. And now I'm so excited to turn it over to Dr. Irwin.
Good afternoon. Let me get to my just the disclosures. I first want to welcome everyone. We've got a big group. So far I'm listing 53 folks that we've got here. I am Dr. Irwin. I'm an attorney, but I just want to, in my disclosures it says this is not legal advice. If you have any questions, specific legal questions, I want to encourage you to contact a lawyer. I'll be happy to answer questions about, what kind of law or like that, but I can't make particular referrals, but do encourage you. So let's start with Section 1. And where you want to start, what we're going to talk about today is advanced planning and planning for your wishes at the end of life. And so what we're going to start with are your values and your documents. And I'm going to walk through in Section 1 some information about how your values get incorporated into the documents that the law has set up to enable you to express your wishes and know that you're going to be cared for in the way that you want to be cared for at the end of your life. The biggest documents that we're going to focus on are the living will and the healthcare proxy, but there are a couple others that I'll mention as we go along. So when we start thinking about advanced planning options, there are many different options for people. The right option for each person is really personal, and not only that, but it's going to evolve over time. So what you think when you're 20 might not be what you think when you're 40 or when you're 50, and you certainly have the right to change your opinion, to incorporate your new knowledge, maybe incorporate new family members into your decision making. And so because of that, it's important to update your advanced planning documents every 10 years or so. In general, in estate planning, we say every time you have a birthday that ends in a 0, you want to get out all of your life planning documents, which all of these are going to be included in that, and review them, make sure they're all up to date, they still reflect what it is that you want. Or when you get married, when you get divorced, when your life partner dies, or other big events in your life. So keep in mind that you might want to do this more than once in your lifetime. And so then we're going to talk about what are advance directives, and this is just you know, kind of a brief way of saying what they are. They're really, the law has seen that there's a need to put in place ways for your values and healthcare decisions to be carried out. The important thing here is that, you know, we're going to talk a lot today about the actual documents that you want to have signed and executed, but the second point that I've got here is that you still need to talk to your family members and healthcare providers and let them know what you desire, because there's no way to communicate your desires and your values like in a conversation and where you can sit down and say, this is really important to me. These are the things that I want to see happen. So it's not just about signing the documents and putting them where they're accessible, but it's also about having those conversations. And the final thing is having these documents is a simple, private way to make sure that your life is lived until the very last on your own terms. In other words, you're going to know that your wishes are going to go on even when you can't speak for yourself any longer. And there aren't going to be any courts involved, and nobody's going to be overlooking things. It's just you, your loved ones, and your healthcare providers making these decisions. So here's some terminology, and I just wanted to get this out there. Some of the things that you want to know, because some of these concepts have different words, and the laws in different states vary a little bit. But somebody says a living will. Most people know that a living will is a document that lets you state your wishes for end-of-life care in advance. It's just a written statement of your values and what you want to happen. Some states may call them advance directives for health care. In Texas, we call them directives to physicians. So whatever they're called in the law, it's a living will. It's a way to have your will live on even when, like I said, you can't speak for yourself. The second document that you want to know about is a healthcare proxy. And the healthcare proxy is your way of saying, here's the person. I want my spouse, or I want my partner, or I want someone in my family, some specific person to make decisions for me when I can't make them for myself. This is a person I've talked to. They understand my values and what I want, and that's the person who I'm appointing. You need to let your whole family know that's who it is that's appointed, and you're going to give them a copy of the proxy, giving them the power to make healthcare decisions for you. And that's a really important step. Some of the things in different states that these are called healthcare power of attorney, durable power of attorney for healthcare. That's lawyer talk for what this is, and the durable power just means the document endures your incapacity. Some places have much more direct terminology. It's just a medical power of attorney, which is very clear. Those are the big two documents that we're going to focus on. But two other things that I want you to think about are do not resuscitate orders in organ donation directions. And the do not resuscitate orders are not for everyone. This can be an in-hospital or an out-of-hospital order you can execute so that in the event that you suffer some life-threatening event, and ordinarily this is something like a heart attack, you don't want to be given life-saving treatment. This is something that people who execute these, you've thought about it, you've come to peace with the fact of your mortality, and you just don't want to have all those chest compressions and all that machinery and all that equipment hooked up to you. And this is a set way of saying, just don't do that stuff, just let me go. Totally your personal decision. If you don't execute this, you're probably going to be resuscitated in almost every case. The other thing is organ donation directions. At the end of your life, you may have perfectly good usable organs that there's an incredible shortage of organs in this country, and so that's sort of a final gift. I know in the Huntington's disease community, the brain registry is a way to donate your brain to science so that research can be done later on. So think about all of those things when you think about the things that you need to do. And the next thing I want to do is just talk about some top myths about advance directives, because I think everybody's heard about them. I want to clarify what they are, but I also want to clarify some of the myths about them. And the biggest myth maybe is that everybody needs one. And when I say everybody needs one, what I mean is maybe everybody needs two. They need two things. You'd be better off having both a living will and a health care proxy, because you might put in your living will that you want some specific thing done, and then something completely different happens that you could not have predicted. And so you want to have somebody there to represent you, speak for you, speak about your values, and be able to make the decisions regarding your treatment options that maybe have uncertain odds or unpredictable outcomes. So you want the living will to say, the normal course of events, this is what I would want done, but in case I'm incapacitated, I want this other person to step in and help make decisions. And they'll make those decisions in accordance with your values and what your living will states. The second thing is that advance directives are for old people. And in honesty, if the elderly were the only ones who became seriously ill, this would be true, but it obviously is not. Something could happen to you even before HD becomes a serious issue. And all sorts of things happen in life. Nobody can predict, HD or not, you can't predict what's going to happen to you. So you need to have these advance directives. And when I teach medical students and I teach them about this, I ask them, these 20-something-year-old students, how many of you have an advance directive? And in a class of 200, a handful will raise their hands, and I tell them, this is your homework. I want you to go home and think about this, because something could happen to you, too. So things happen to everyone. Everybody needs an advance directive. The third myth that I want to think about is that just telling my family and my doctor what I want will be enough. Unfortunately, this is not true. Sometimes it is true. If you have super reliable relatives who totally understand you and you have no disagreements about your values, that would be good. But unfortunately, even in the most loving of families, misunderstandings and personal feelings run high at times of crisis. I've seen this over and over where family members at the end of someone's life, they just don't want to let that person go, and it's just so hard. And you need to make sure when you commit that your wishes are communicated to somebody who's capable of executing them, and you should talk to your family and supplement and explain the reasoning behind the directives and written documents that you've executed. And that's another reason why it's important to choose the right person to be your health care proxy. So advance directives don't always mean don't treat. And what I mean by that is an advance directive is your wishes. And there are sometimes that the patients will come in for whatever reasons. A lot of times it's cultural reasons or religious reasons or spiritual reasons. They really want everything done that medicine can do, because that is their belief system. So while a living will may be used to say you don't want to have medical treatments, they can also be used to say that you wish to have all the medical care that's consistent with generally accepted medical standards. So if there's something that can be done, you want it done. So you can also say that in your advance directive. The whole idea with this is to be clear about your values, express them clearly, and when you write them down, you might want to have somebody read over it, make sure that it's clear what it is that you want. So if you want to be treated, say that. And the fifth myth about advance directives is that you'll lose control over medical decisions once you execute the documents. And I just want to restate that as long as you're able to make your own decisions and voice them, you remain in complete and total control of what happens to your body. That's a legal as well as an ethical principle. Providers who don't honor your wishes could be guilty of things like battery or negligence. So that's just not going to happen. So it's only when you become unable to express your wishes that a living will or proxy literally springs into action. We call it in the law, we call it a springing interest. It literally, when you are unable to make your own decisions, you lack what the physicians call capacity to make decisions, then these documents spring into action and they say, here's what this person would say if they could speak for themselves, or here is the person who can speak for them. So if this whole idea of losing control is at all of a concern to you, it's really important for you to consider who's going to be named your healthcare decision-making proxy, because that person who you name is going to have the power to make those decisions. If they try to make decisions that go against your will, then you're going to have someone else may come in and try to remove them as the proxy, but you need to talk this over with them, make sure that they can make the decisions you want to be made. And so, for example, if you say, if I reach the point where I'm incapacitated and I'm on treatments that just enable me to be hooked up to machines and there's really no hope of recovery, I want that stopped. You have to understand some of your family members may not be able to do that. They just literally may not be able to disconnect the medical equipment that's keeping you alive, marginally alive. So be sure that you know who you're choosing for this. The sixth myth is that doctors are not obligated to follow my advance directive anyway, so it's pointless to do this. And I will say that legally it's false, but as usual, reality gets in the way of this always working out exactly the way that the law would have it to do. Doctors are human beings, and sometimes you have to remind them of their obligations. And when I say it's an obligation, it's not just an ethical or a clinical obligation. It is a legal obligation. At the same time, there may be reasons, really good reasons, why healthcare providers may be unable to follow the exact wishes you express in your documents. It may be medically infeasible. It may be medically impossible. It's usually not impossible to disconnect treatment, but there may be something there that, you know, I've seen cases where other things impinge, where
Dr. Irwin?
Yes.
This is Jane. Sorry to interrupt you. Would you mind just turning your speakers off? We're getting a lot of feedback every single time somebody joins the conference.
I don't have speakers on.
Ah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I know they're completely off.
I'm so sorry. Do you have your Outlook off? That's the other thing.
Outlook. Let me see. Yeah.
X out of your Outlook and see if that helps.
Okay, get out of that.
And everybody, I'm very sorry for the interruption. This will hopefully
Okay, let's see if that helps.
Okay.
Well, now we have to get back to, well, that's okay if it makes it better. If it makes, let's everybody cross your fingers and hope for the best here. And we'll continue. I think we're moving along at a pretty good rate, so we're okay. And I'm trying to leave some time at the end for everybody who has questions. I expect there are going to be a lot of people with questions, so I'm trying to leave time at the end for questions. So everybody, I think there's a place that you can write them in and send them to us. So I was on. That's just fine. That doctors are obligated to follow your advance directive. it's totally not pointless to fill out these documents. You really need to do this. And the seventh point, the seventh sort of myth about advance directives is it's too complicated and I can't do it and I'm going to need a lawyer and lawyers cost money and I don't have that. And you don't need a lawyer to fill out these forms. Now, lawyers have a whole different kind of way of looking at this, but these are very simple forms. They're values forms. And your lawyer may be a good resource in this process in helping you think through this, but totally not necessary. And I've got some websites that I'm going to share with you that will enable you to go to your state's forms and find the forms and sit down and read through them. Now, if you're going through a divorce or you're going through some other event where you've already got a lawyer involved in things, your lawyer may be able to draw up a new set of documents for you at that same time. So that may be a good idea. And then 8th, I have to follow the form prescribed by the state. Well, yes and no. For the most part, no, though. And here's why. And let me just tell you the reasoning behind why states put these forms out. So, for example, the state of Texas, when we revamped our Advance Directives law, and it's just this huge thing in the Health and Safety Code, we put in there, here's a form that patients could use. And the only reason it's in there is so that people will have a form that they can use. It's public record. You can get it. It's for free. I mean, that was the whole idea, so that you have a form for free and you don't feel like you have to go to a lawyer and spend a lot of money. That's not the same thing as saying that's the only form you can use. It's not the same thing as saying you have to use this form. Some states have some type of form that should be, quote unquote, substantially followed, but most don't require a certain type of form, and none of them require magic language or that the words be in some particular order. No matter what form you use, it should be modified to reflect your values, your desires and priorities. And to give a silly example, the Texas form uses a checkbox approach, which you can literally, and this is what's in the statute, the suggested form for Texas. I want everything possible to be done in my care, or I want nothing to be done, and they suggest that folks just check the box. And when I teach this both to doctors in Texas and to patient groups, I say, okay, here's what you do. You cross that out on the form and you write in the margins, see the attached 5 pages of notes. Because if you really want to use this form, I want to make sure that you're not just checking a box. I want you to have thought about it. I want you to know that you can add on there, even if you use a form, additional things that reference your own personal values. So it's really important for you to take the time to think through what is important to you. So things like pain control, you might, no matter what, you still want adequate pain control at the end of life. You might want minimal procedures. For example, I've got family coming from out of town or out of state, and if a blood transfusion would keep me alive for the next 24 hours and give me the blood transfusion but nothing else. So some of those things, again, are things that may need to be answered at the time of the event, but you need to think about this in writing out these forms. You don't want to say everything or nothing. Okay, and so I want to go now. I think we have time to go to where you can find the forms that you need. And I've got a website in here. And I think these slides will be available. So this will be available to you. And I'm going to just click on this. This is a great website by Caring Connections. And I hope you all can see my screen and my internet connection there. That link will take you to this website, and you can literally download your state's advance directives. And so let's, for example, go down here and let's go to the New York form. So you just go down here and click on New York, and it just takes you right to the form. It gives you some preliminary. That's just how to how to execute this once the form is completed and signed, photocopy the form, and so forth. So it really walks you through it. And it's going to give you, again, the healthcare proxy and the living will. So this is a good form. New York has done a good job here. What if you change your mind? You can revoke it by notifying your agent or healthcare provider, or any other act that clearly shows your intent to revoke the document. I would say crossing it out. If you make a new one, right on the top of the new one, this new document revokes the prior document. And then here is the New York form. And you just fill all this out. So let's go back, and hopefully we can find another one. So the New York form was 6 pages long. I'll take you to the Texas form and show you it has the same preliminary matter up here. Then when you get down to the whole Texas form, we're a lot more worried down here. We got 14 pages. Not necessarily a good thing, but we got 14 pages just the same. So you can find your state's form on here on this website. So hopefully that will be helpful to you. So here we go, back to, that's where we were. Okay. When you go to that page that's linked there are additional resources on that page. I went to the forms to kind of show you where the forms are for your state, but there are a lot of other links to help you think through the process, and I like that website a lot. This is important. When the forms are completed, and it'll say it in the preliminary matter on those forms, give a copy of your documents to the person who will take care of you. That's the person who you're going to name as your healthcare proxy. Make sure they have it. Make sure your healthcare provider has a copy. I've got a copy in my safe deposit box of my own personal form, as well as a copy in my file cabinet in my house. So I've got my forms in several places that people can find them. So we're going to turn now. That's the information on the forms. And again, I'm sure you all have questions about that, so I think you can send those in. And we're going to talk about how to make personal decisions. And this is just something that I suggest to folks in thinking through what you want to have done. The first thing you want to do is take an inventory of your own personal values and beliefs. And I've put some questions here to help you get started thinking about that. And I would start with this. As you understand it, what are the most important considerations to your end-of-life care? What would you want to gain in planning your end-of-life care? And by that, people say things like, I want to gain control. I want to know that I'm in control of myself. I want the dignity of having that control. Or I really want to relieve my loved ones of the decisions for doing this. I don't want them to have to make these decisions for me. I know how difficult it is. I know how much of a burden it is. I don't want them to have that. What would you want to avoid in end-of-life care? Some of the things that you could avoid by thinking through this in advance are bickering among family members. I've seen families who don't talk to each other for a year, literally loving families who they were in so much disagreement over the end-of-life care for Dad that they still can't talk to each other. So you want to avoid that. Maybe you want to avoid confusion over what would Dad want, or the costs that are associated with making these decisions. And think about your sources of strength. What gives you strength? Your family, your community. These are going to be really important and personal things to you. How does your faith influence your thinking about these issues? Your faith may give you direction. It may give you a fairly clear picture of what you need to do. Draw on that. And then what gives your life meaning? How can you preserve that? How can you make sure that that's not destroyed and that's not damaged in any way during your end-of-life care? And then the next thing is, can you explain this to your loved ones? I know that sounds like an odd question, but you're going to have to talk to them about it. And these things, you may know what gives your life meaning, but it's more of a feeling and less of, putting it into words. So try to put it in words, and then you're going to have that conversation. So try to explain it in maybe small conversations. And then ask them if they can respect your wishes even if they disagree with you, because they might. And then you're trying to talk to your loved ones. But before you do, you're not done talking to yourself here. So you're going to still begin. We just talked about your values and beliefs. Now I want to talk about your emotions and your feelings. Ask yourself about preferences and fears. Particularly, do you fear being alone at the end of your life? Do you want everybody around you, or do you just want to be left alone? Do you fear leaving unfinished projects? Do you fear dying in a strange place? Leaving your loved ones without adequate financial resources? Do you fear a loss of dignity as you lie sedated? All these things are really important. These are your feelings, and these are things that you want to think about. And you want to make sure as much as you can that you let people know, I don't want to die in a strange place. I want to die at home, or that little community hospital. I don't want to go to that big impersonal medical center. I want to go to the little hospital in my community where the nurses are, they have time and they talk to patients and they're friendly. So you need to think about those things. Now it's time to talk to your loved ones. And I'm going to read each one of these because each one of these, it deserves to be discussed. First of all, talk openly about your wishes for the end of your life. It doesn't help to keep this bottled up. It's a hard conversation. And, I know my husband said something to me just last week about, this is what I want at the end of my life. And then he left on a business trip, and I was like, oh my gosh, you don't have some premonition, do you? It's like, everybody has that. It's hard to talk about these things. Use small openings in everyday conversations to mention that you've been thinking about it. Everybody thinks about it. It's kind of a taboo in our culture to say it, but the more little conversations you have, the easier it is. Ask your doctor when you might expect to face serious cognitive decline and loss of decision-making ability. The PREDICT study has done wonders for being able to tell many years in advance, up to 9 to 15 years in advance, when will we really see the onset of clinical symptoms, when will we really see the cognitive decline. You want to make these decisions before that cognitive decline sets in. And then specifically, who do I want to make healthcare decisions for me? Who should make financial decisions? Maybe there's going to be two different people. Maybe one family member is really good about healthcare and the other person is an accountant. What medical treatments are acceptable to you? Are there some things that you particularly fear? Some people have real problems with certain things. Let people know that. Write that down. Tell your loved ones. Do you wish to be resuscitated if you stop breathing or your heart stops? Make that known. Again, these are things you want to talk to your loved ones about. After you've thought about it, talk about it. Do you want to be hospitalized or stay home somewhere else, surrounded by people you love me, or die in private with as little fuss as possible? And ask your loved ones, are you prepared for the decisions you might have to make? Have you thought about it? So these are all things that you want to talk about. And then I want to think about working with your health care provider. The place to begin is with an honest conversation with your primary health care provider. And you should have this conversation years in advance. Some specific things that your provider can do is answer any questions you might have about treatment options or hospital policies. Quite honestly, hospitals have different policies, and you might want to say, well, if that hospital doesn't do what I want done, then I want to be admitted to the hospital that does. Point out your provider can point out any inconsistencies in your decisions and help you clarify your wishes. And she can tell you if there are any requests that you have she can't address because of her own personal, moral, religious, or spiritual beliefs. So these are the things that I talk to healthcare providers when they're in medical school. These are some of the things that I talk to them. And basically, if you want someone to help you do something, you want someone to help you preserve your values, make it really easy for them to do. So have this conversation, and then the law is backing you up on this. The informed consent duties that providers have are duties that your healthcare provider owes to you. So these are things that you can expect from your doctor or your healthcare provider. You have a right to receive information before you get treated. That your doctor has a duty to act reasonably in disclosing all of the relevant information. In other words, they cannot play hide the ball with you. They need to tell you everything. And that means that you have the right to ask questions. And if something's not clear, you can say, can you help me understand that? Can you explain that again? I'm sorry, but what am I hearing this right? Am I thinking about this right? And the ethical principles that lie behind this for medical ethics is autonomy and respect for persons. And this means that doctors are expected to provide treatment in accordance with what the patient wished. They're expected to not do any harm. There's non-maleficence is a big word for just do no harm. In other words, don't provide the patient with unwanted or intrusive treatments. If the patient doesn't want to be treated, they should not have to be. Not only that, you have a legal right to not be treated. And then they also have a duty to benefit the patient and do what's beneficial to you. But here's the important thing is the patient defines what's of benefit. You define what's of benefit to you and what's not of benefit. So those are important things to know when you're talking with your healthcare provider. So legally valid consent. When you give consent to a procedure, you shouldn't be coerced. You shouldn't have a lot of people saying, no, Mom, you can't do that, or why would you want to do that? You need to make the decision for yourself. This is a very personal decision. Don't let anyone coerce you, not your family, not your healthcare provider. You have the right to understand what the doctors can disclose to you. Don't worry too much about those legal standards, but it's important that you and your proxy should be able to ask very specific questions about your care if you're not sure about the options. And then when you do lose decision-making capacity, the doctor can't just go do whatever they want to. They still have a legal obligation to get consent from the proxy decision maker. So your doctor's going to be looking for that healthcare proxy, and they're going to be saying, who holds that decision-making power, because that's the person I need to talk to. So for your end-of-life decisions and competence, it's really important. I've got one case law coming out of California here that said if the patient is conscious but unable to express their wishes, the proxy decision maker can't substitute their own wishes for what the patient would have wanted. So that person who holds your healthcare proxy has to base their decisions on your wishes. And in this Wendland versus Wendland case, it was a case where the wife and the mother of the patient disagreed on what could happen or what should happen should life support be discontinued. And the mother wanted it discontinued for her own reasons, and the wife said, no, this is not what John would have wanted. And the court there, this was the California Supreme Court, said it's not about the wife and it's not about the mother. It's about the patient and what would they have wanted, and we're going with that evidence. So that's when the courts get involved, that's what happens. So how do you resolve disagreements when the family disagrees? And the important thing here is if there's no advance directive, then you've got some state laws that are going to kick in, and you've got a decision-making statute, but remember, this is only going to happen if there's no advance directive. If you have a directive in place, if you're on this call, you're thinking about this, I hope you're going to go out and do this right away. This won't be a problem for you, but if you die without an advance directive, who's going to make your decision? I've got a list down here in the middle. The states usually say if somebody's appointed the guardian, they make the decision. Next in line is the spouse, adult children, maybe the parents or other relatives who are available, but it's always going to be the spouse over anyone else. And that may or may not be a good thing in your particular case. So institutional ethics committees get involved in these things all the time, or courts may appoint a guardian where the surrogate's not acting the way that they should be doing. If the proxy's saying, well, this is what I want, so this is what we're going to do, that's just wrong. You have to, like I said, is make the decision based on the individual's wishes. And I'm going to go really quickly through guardianship or advanced planning, and then I'll kind of take some questions, open up everything to questions. So again, like I said, guardianship should be your last resort. It's there. If you need it, you're going to have to get the courts involved. You can get around this completely by having a durable power of attorney or advance directive. And I've just made some bullet points of differences between the two. Under an advance directive, the agent is appointed by the patient. So you get to say who's going to make those decisions. Under the guardianship, it's going to be who does the court appoint. For the term, if you've appointed somebody and you regain consciousness, you can revoke them, or you can change your mind later and have them revoked. Under guardianship, you've got to go back to court. Under the durable power of attorney, you've got medical or financial powers of attorney or proxies. Under the guardianship, you can have whatever the court says. And so I think that you can see that the important point there is you retain control if you execute your own documents. And anybody can petition the court for guardianship. So let's say you're in a position where you're the caretaker for someone who doesn't have these advance directives in place, and you see things happening in their care and family members bickering and someone taking control and pressing their wishes, you can petition the court for guardianship, and the courts can do that. These are sort of the factors that the courts will look at when they're deciding who should be the guardian. Is whoever is going to look after the ward's property and who's not going to abuse the ward's preferences. The courts are going to look at the facts and not the emotions and not who can scream the loudest. So that's when the courts get involved. And the guardian can be removed if they fail to fulfill certain duties, or if the ward's condition changes, meaning they get better, or if it's challenged in court and saying you didn't take care of the ward, or the ward has regained competency. So I guess these are the conclusions. This advanced planning lets you retain control over what happens to you. The basic documents you really, really need. Everybody needs a living will and a healthcare proxy. You can be an organ donor. You need to fill that out ahead of time. Or you can execute a do not resuscitate order. But I think the bottom line is that advanced planning is a much, much better option than guardianship. And I've got some resources on the next page, but I think we'll go ahead and, well, here are the resources, and just a second, I'll take some questions. You can click on those. Jane, are these going to be available to everyone when we get off the call?
Yes, Cheryl. So all of this presentation will be available after the webinar about a week after broadcast. You'll be able to watch the live recording as well as download the slides.
Excellent. Okay, that's great. I picked out what I felt like were some really, really good links. The first one that we went to, And then the American Bar Organization has an incredibly good set of documents put together. And each of the states has some, so I've just picked out some suggested resources for you. And let me see if I can answer questions. I think we've got about 15 minutes, so I don't know if how can we get to the questions. Let me see if
So Cheryl, you should see the chat pane right above the questions pane right above your chat pane.
Oh, okay. There we go. So I expand that. Wow, I can barely see that. Let's see.
Cheryl, to see it better, try undocking it from the pane by going to your upper the right-hand corner.
Okay, I think I've got it. Okay, I'll see what we can do. I'll just read the question. Does a spouse need to be the official guardian for Huntington's disease patient if she has a power of attorney and a health care directive? And this question is from Terry. No, you don't have to. I hope I answered that as we went along, is you don't have to be the official guardian. When you say official guardian, that means you've gone to a court and you've been appointed the guardian. If you have the power of attorney for the durable power of attorney for health care, then you have been named officially to be the decision maker. The only way that you would not be the decision maker in that case is if somebody could challenge you. Let's say adult kids are there and they're saying, well, you know, Mom's not making good decisions for Dad. That's not what Dad wanted, and I've seen these cases happen. And then they could go to court, and they would have to take you to court. That was what the Wendland versus Wendland case was about. The daughter who was, or the wife, rather, challenged her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law wanted to change the decisions, and the court said, look, the daughter's going by what her husband wants. That's what we're going by. So the only reason that a spouse would ever, if you have the documents, the only reason you would ever have to have a guardianship through the courts is if you were challenged. It's very rare that that ever happens. I'm not saying it never happens, but you totally going in, I don't think that there's any reason for you to have to think about that. I hope that works. Okay, now the second question, can DNRs be included in the health care directive? Absolutely, absolutely. You can make that a part of your living will or your directive to physicians. You can also make a DNR a separate document that is executed separately. In a lot of states now we have out-of-hospital DNRs, which are documents that if something happens to you, you're at home and you don't want to be resuscitated by the emergency medical team that picks you up, you can give them the document, or your loved ones can give them the out-of-hospital DNR. And so in some cases it's good to have that extra document, but you can totally make it a part of the health care advance directive. So you do it either way, or maybe better, do both. Okay, next question. Is being connected to medical equipment a common situation in end-of-life situations for Huntington's disease patients? And I can't speak to that. I'm not a physician, but it certainly could be a case. I mean, here's the thing, and this was from Ken, and I will just tell you, Ken, that Huntington's disease patients are no different than anybody else. And my point about that you should do this many years in advance still holds true. You could be walking down the street, and I've told this story a lot. I was walking to my office. I'm at Texas Medical Center, and this is an insanely busy place. So I was walking to my office. I was crossing a street within the campus of the medical center, and I was literally hit by a truck and run over. I was fine. It was very, very scary. I was absolutely certain that I was going to die, but I didn't. In fact, the truck stopped just as it hit me. But I tell that story because of this. Because you have Huntington's disease does not mean that nothing else is going to happen to you. So even if it's not common or it's not ordinarily the way that things happen with HD, it's still something that can happen to you. Just if you're walking down the street, all kinds of things happen. So I hope that answers your question. HD has a standard course of 20 years. What about earlier in the disease process when someone becomes symptomatic? What is the legal process that takes place in the workplace to determine whether a person can still work? Who triggers this process? What are the rights of the patient employee? And that is an excellent question. I'm not sure I can even
Hi, Sarah.
start to answer that. I can tell you this, and it's really kind of beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. But you do have rights under the Americans with Disabilities Act, under Title I of the Act. I think the best thing I can do is to refer you to the HD helpline or your social workers, or maybe even a private attorney, because if you're having issues and you're becoming symptomatic, if you're otherwise qualified to continue doing your work, then in general, your employer is going to have some obligations there to make reasonable accommodations for you. But that is, again, something that I want to refer you to legal counsel.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hey.
This is Jane. The previous Lunch and Learn that is available for broadcast is all about workplace accommodations for Huntington's disease, and it's presented by the Job Accommodation Network. So that would be a really, really good place to start for some basic information about workplace accommodations for HD. And then, as Cheryl said, calling the HDSA helpline and working with your social worker to get local referrals and ideas for you is also a great idea, as is speaking with your doctor. But a great place to start is by watching that Lunch and Learn.
Yeah, I actually watched that. I attended that webinar, and it was really good. And it's the reason why I think it's important for everybody to just know you do have some legal rights out there. Go find them. Go to that webinar, and don't give up, and don't stop, because you do have some rights. So thank you, Jane. That's an excellent point.
Yeah, and also Jan, the organization that did the webinar, actually provides free and confidential counseling specifically on job accommodations. And they can sort of help you formulate it, talk to your employer, talk about how to document it and write down the types of accommodations you need, as well as suggest accommodations based on the troubles that you're facing.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on here. As a caregiver and the HD loved one does not want to plan for end of life, is it recommended that the caregiver put some decisions on paper to get the conversation started or validated? Let me go back and read that one again. As a caregiver and the HD loved one does not want to, okay, so the caregiver does not want to plan for end of life. Is it recommended that the caregiver put some decisions on paper to get the conversation started or validated? Okay, I think I get it. Okay, so what you're asking is the HD patient doesn't want to get this started. Should the caregiver prompt them? Yeah, absolutely. My concern here is you don't want to be coercive of the person with HD. It's a very, like I said, it's a very difficult conversation to have, but anything that opens the conversation would be great. So Yeah, I think you can open it up, but again, be careful that you're not being coercive as the caregiver, and encouraging the person to make their wishes known, but not coercive. So it's kind of a hard thing. Okay, does a living will apply to children, or does it apply only to one individual? Let me see. Does a living will apply to children? Let me say this: children can make a living will, yes. And for this is something that's going to vary from state to state. So children can execute a living will, or they can make their wishes known. It's the parents who obviously are going to be the ones who have to carry that out in almost every case. You don't have to be 18 or 21 to make these. So you can, there's a little bit of a caveat here with children. Again, one of the things that's going to apply is doctors are always going to want to err, particularly with children, on the side of saving life. With the thinking being, if you have a child, someone who's under 18, and they say, I want to execute a do not resuscitate order. I don't want to be kept alive in any circumstances whatsoever. The question is going to come up is, do they really have the cognitive capacity as a child to understand that? Are they really able to make that particular decision? And so I would say that a child's living will would be honored if it expressed a desire to live. It might be challenged just because the thinking is you want that child to live long enough to become an adult, so you're certain that they're making an informed, a truly comprehending decision. So I hope that's not too much of a legalistic answer, but I think that's pretty much how that will work out. I hope that answered it.
Great. Joe, we have about 2 minutes left, so if anyone has any last minute or other questions, please send them on.
Okay, let's see. So I had a question come in. I think this might be the last question I have time to take just because of the time. Are there any legal methods for a parent with HD who has joint custody with a deadbeat dad to specify who they want to have custody of their children once they become incapacitated? Oh, gosh. Oh, that's such a hard question. Any legal methods for a parent with HD who has joint custody to specify who they want to have custody of their children once they become, you know what, this is really tough. The courts are totally going to want to be in control of that, because courts are just, for one thing, they're bound by the Uniform Parentage Act, and there are some real problems with taking custody away from a natural parent. You could go to court and try to prove, I mean, just depending on the circumstances, and all of these things are so personal. Just being a deadbeat dad or a deadbeat parent may not be enough, but there may be some other things that if you've created some sort of animosity between the father and the child, there may be some ways to challenge it. So this is a place where I'm really going to say you need legal counsel in your state. Okay, does a husband have to be over care, or can you pick another family member? Oh yeah, you can totally pick another family member. And I'll just give, we're totally out of time, so I'll just answer this question real briefly. This happened in my own father-in-law's death, and he died recently from Alzheimer's. and had planned in advance and had named one of his children to be his decision maker rather than his wife, because he knew that his wife could not make that decision. And when it came down to it, she could not make that decision. She could not let go of him no matter what. She could not say no, and that was not what he wanted, and he knew that. And so he named his daughter, one of his 3 daughters, to be that. So it doesn't have to be a husband or a wife. It can be whoever can make that decision the best. Okay, so we're going to have to stop there. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. It's been fun for me, and I hope it's been a learning experience for you all. And have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. And if you have any other suggested topics or if something that you wanted to hear about wasn't covered, please tell us about it on your evaluation so that we can continue to improve our program. And thank you to you, Cheryl, for such an informative, wonderful presentation.
Thank you, and everybody go have a great day. Bye-bye.